So we've been unpacking this Declaration of Interdependence, how our lives are woven together in this tapestry of shared responsibility, collective well-being. It's powerful. But how do we reconcile that with, the fact that we live in a world of so many different perspectives, different values? What's right for one person might not be right for another. How do we deal with that complexity?
That's a crucial point, especially with interdependence. You have to recognize all those perspectives, all those values out there. That's key for creating a society where everyone feels, valued and respected.
It's like that saying, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. But how do we actually do that? How do we bridge those gaps, find common ground when our values clash?
It all starts with empathy, really trying to understand where someone else is coming from, listening without judgment, asking questions, being open to the idea that maybe our own perspective isn't the whole picture.
So it's not about forcing everyone to agree on everything. It's about creating space for different viewpoints to, I don't know, coexist, even inform each other. But this goes back to that challenge of balancing individual freedom with the needs of the group. That tension, how do we navigate it? It feels like a constant push and pull.
It is a delicate balance, for sure. But remember, individual freedoms, they're not absolute. They exist within a social context. They come with responsibilities. The Declaration of Interdependence reminds us that our actions have consequences. We have a duty to think about how our choices impact others.
Freedom with accountability. We're free to make our own choices, but we also have to own the results, good or bad. Recognizing we're not isolated, but interconnected. Nodes in this, network of relationships.
Exactly. And it's that interconnectedness that makes life so, I don't know, rich, complex. It's also what makes it tough sometimes. But when we embrace interdependence, when we get that we're all in this together, that's where we tap into incredible strength, incredible resilience, the kind that can help us overcome anything.
It's like we're all part of this giant tapestry, each thread unique and essential. The stronger those threads, the more resilient the whole thing becomes. How do we cultivate this interdependence mindset, though, in our own lives? Where do we start?
It starts with small actions, everyday things, being kind to strangers, helping a neighbor, volunteering. Those are simple but powerful ways to practice interdependence.
So it's not about some big, grand gesture. It's those little acts of connection, choosing we over me in those daily moments. And that reminds me, we talked about doing more with less, how that can apply to so many parts of life.
Absolutely. It's being mindful of what we consume, reducing waste, finding creative ways to use resources more efficiently. Think about carpooling, sharing tools, even repairing things instead of tossing them out. That mindset shift can have a huge impact on the planet, on our communities.
It's like we're all playing a massive game of Tetris, trying to fit our individual pieces together so it all works, so it's sustainable and harmonious. But it's not always easy, is it? There are times when those pieces clash, when our needs conflict. What then?
Of course, there'll be friction. That's where communication and compromise come in. Being willing to listen to different viewpoints, to find solutions that benefit everyone, even if it means some personal sacrifice.
A negotiation, then. Constant give and take. But we got to be honest about our needs, right?
Yeah.
And willing to work together to find solutions that meet those needs in a way that works for everyone long term.
Exactly. This brings us back to the social contract. When we embrace interdependence, we acknowledge we have rights and responsibilities. We have the right to pursue our own happiness, but also the responsibility to contribute to the well-being of the community that supports us.
It's a two-way street. We get benefits from society, so we have a duty to give back, to pay it forward. But this interdependence idea, it's not just our local communities, right? It's global, too.
Absolutely. We live in an interconnected world. The challenges we face, climate change, poverty, inequality, they need global solutions. Interdependence on that scale means recognizing that people in other countries, their well-being is just as important as our own.
So it's about expanding that circle of compassion to include everyone. No matter where they're from, their background, we're all part of this one big family sharing this planet.
Beautifully put. And it requires us to think beyond our immediate needs, to consider the long-term impact of what we do, making choices that benefit future generations, not just ourselves.
We're holding this fragile web of life in our hands. We have to care for it, mend the tears, strengthen the connections. This brings up a big question for me. How does interdependence work in politics? Because right now, it feels like the opposite of interdependent.
That's a great question, one that deserves its own exploration. In the last part of our deep dive, we'll tackle the complexities of interdependence in the political world, how we can navigate that tricky landscape.
Okay, looking forward to that. But for now, let's take a moment to think about what we've talked about. Interdependence, on a personal level, a societal level. It's a powerful way to understand how connected we all are, how we can create a world that's more just, more sustainable, more fulfilling.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, personal
Mhm.
implications, societal implications
Yeah.
of interdependence. But you mentioned the political landscape, and that's where it feels the most, I don't know, disconnected these days. It seems like everything's so polarized, everyone's in their own camps, seeing the other side as the enemy. Does interdependence even stand a chance in that kind of climate?
It's a valid point. We are seeing that us versus them mentality everywhere. And that's like the opposite of interdependence. It's ironic, right?
Hmm.
Because the whole point of politics is supposed to be finding solutions that work for everyone, not just a select few. And now even interdependence itself is like politicized.
It's true. It's like a giant tug of war, everyone pulling, but nobody moving forward. Where does that shared responsibility fit in, The foundation of interdependence and all this chaos? I think it goes back to the social contract. In a democracy, the government represents the people, right? Works for the common good. But when that shared responsibility crumbles, when people put their own interest above everything else, the whole system starts to, I don't know, fall apart. It's like that Jenga tower, pulling out one too many blocks. Eventually, it all collapses.
So how do we rebuild that trust, that sense of we're all in this together when it feels like we're drifting apart? It seems impossible.
It's a huge challenge. But I think it starts with recognizing the humanity in people who see things differently than you, listening to their concerns, trying to understand where they're coming from, and finding that common ground where we can at least agree to disagree,
Hmm.
respectfully. It's not about erasing differences. It's about learning to coexist and work together to solve the problems we face as a society.
Building bridges, not walls. Recognizing that we all want our society to succeed, even if we don't agree on how to get there. But how do we turn those ideals into action? What can we, like regular people, do to promote interdependence in this mess?
First, stay informed. Educate yourself. Talk to people who have different views, but do it respectfully. And vote. Vote for candidates who genuinely care about the common good. It's also important to support organizations that are trying to, bridge those divides, promote understanding across the political spectrum.
So be an active citizen, not just a bystander. Use your voice, use your vote to create a political system that reflects those values of interdependence. But we also need to hold our leaders accountable, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. We need to demand that they choose collaboration over confrontation, that they look for solutions that benefit everyone, not just their own little group. And we need to call them out when they don't.
It's like we're conducting this massive orchestra, and it's our job to make sure everyone's playing in tune. But sometimes it feels like, the instruments are all out of whack, the rhythm's off, and it's all about to fall apart. How do we bring it all back together?
It takes patience,
Yeah.
persistence, and a willingness to keep listening, even when it's hard. Remember, we're all human. We have our own hopes, our own fears, our own dreams, and we have to believe that despite our differences, we can build a world that works for everyone.
Well said. And to everyone listening, I hope this deep dive into the Declaration of Interdependence has given you some new ideas, challenged some old ones, and maybe inspired you to think more about the power of connection. It's not a magic bullet, but it's a way to understand how intertwined our lives are, how we can build a world that's more just, more sustainable, more fulfilling. It's about realizing we're part of something bigger, that what we do matters. So go out there, make your actions count. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.